Yes, madam. You start, madam.
Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 23rd edition of our generic talk series. Today, we embark on an exciting journey into the realm of research methodologies. Before we begin today's session, let us take a moment to recognize the remarkable vision and commitment that have paved the way for this gathering. The unwavering support and guidance of our institution's leadership ensure that we continually benefit from exceptional opportunities to learn, grow, and innovate. To officially commence today's program, I'm delighted to invite our esteemed principal, Dr. K.A. Mohammad Junaid sir, to deliver the welcome address and set the tone for this promising day. Please, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. The most respected chief guest of today's Generic Talk series, Mr. Colonel B. Venkat sir, Registrar of Teresa's University, New Delhi. Respected HODs, faculty members, students and parents, and all the viewers of this Generic Talk series organized by Computer Science and Design Department of our RMK Engineering College. On behalf of our respected chairman, sir, all the members of the management, faculty members, students, and my own behalf, I wholeheartedly thank and welcome Mr. Colonel B. Venkat sir for accepting our invitation and to deliver a talk on research methodologies organized by RMK Engineering College. Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So really, this generic talk series will be very useful not only for our students and faculty members. So it will be useful for all the viewers who are going to view this through our YouTube channel in the near future. So really, we are very much honored to have Mr. Colonel B. Venkat sir, who has been connecting with us for the past more than 1 decade with respect to all the developments and initiatives of our RMK group of engineering colleges. And I'm thankful to our management for providing this kind of opportunity to conduct this generic talk series along with a lot of other activities for the benefit of our students and also the other students and participants of this kind of programs organized by RMK group of engineering colleges. I would like to thank the CSD HOD, Dr. Tangaramya Madam, and the team of faculty members from RMK Engineering College for taking very sincere efforts and tireless efforts for organizing these kind of events with eminent resource personalities like Mr. Colonel B. Venkat sir. So thank you. So definitely this talk on research methodologies will be very useful to start your or to proceed your research in a correct way to get the best outcome for your research. Thank you for the given opportunity. So once again, I welcome you all.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. Your support and guidance continually motivate us to strive for excellence. The moment has arrived to present the centerpiece of today's session, our esteemed speaker. I now call upon our beloved head of the department, Dr. S. Tangaramya ma'am, to kindly introduce our chief guest. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have Colonel B. Venkat sir today with us. Sir has served in Indian Army in the technical branch, Corps of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering, having done his mechanical engineering from Army institutes. Having more than 3 decades of service experience and served in all possible appointments of command, staff, and instructional, Colonel B. Venkat sir has excelled in all the professional courses and training at India and abroad. He has a unique distinction of representing India as its technical military attaché to Russia, thereby contributing effectively in improving bilateral relations and negotiations leading to modernization of the Indian Army. Sir has been recognized and has been awarded on multiple occasions at the highest level in the Indian Army, besides the organization which he commanded being declared the best in an operational theatre. As Director, Faculty Development at AICTE, he was instrumental in fine-tuning the faculty development, related issues, and release of multiple grants in an extremely transparent and effective manner. Multiple initiatives and activities were conceptualized to include the promotion of research attaining higher qualifications, training on domain-specific and related subjects leading to capacity building of the faculty members. The officer has also expertise in AICT's quality initiatives like NITTT, National Initiative for Technical Teacher Training, implementation of examiner reforms, AICT Students Learning Assessment, PARAC, AICT's 360-degree feedback mechanism, and processes of implementation of NEP 2020. In the previous assignment as registrar, Central University, Rajasthan, he is instrumental in management of administration and fine-tuning the work through effective implementation of online processes. Presently, Sir is working as a registrar in Terry School of Advanced Studies. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us today. And for today, for the FDP on the research methodologies. Over to you, sir. The stage is yours. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am, for that insightful and motivating introduction. The moment we have all been eagerly awaiting has finally arrived. It's with great pride and honor that I welcome our distinguished guest, Mr. Colonel B. Venkat Sir, Registrar, Teresa's, Delhi. Please join me in extending a warm welcome as we invite Mr. Colonel B. Venkat Sir to enlighten us on the topic of research methodologies. Please, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, Dr. Thangaramya, ma'am, and great thanks to the principal, Dr. Mohammad Junaid. It's actually, seriously speaking, it's an honor to be connecting with you people, because the last time I do recollect, it was during Corona times or something, which I was very actively involved in getting connected on various aspects. But coming back and getting connected, it's so very nice and very good to see the work that especially you and your department in specific reference to the faculty members and your institute is doing. It's always a pleasure to continuously read about your exploits, continuously visit your website, and such a good thing. I have taken a lot of cues from your website.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Pardon me for saying, but this is what is called as, best practices. One has to learn from each other. I made my team visit your website and I have taken down certain aspects which is so very highlighted there. I have told them to implement it in our university's website.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No, that just goes to say, that you people are an inspirational and a leader. And with this this topic series which you people have started on a subject and further then giving it across to the students through your YouTube channel, I think this is also something which I need to now implement. At least I'll give a thought process. Well, there are a lot of factors involved, in a university model, there are a lot of factors involved, but I will take this and I will acknowledge that this is being done on absolutely after attending a talk of RMK. It will be there on my webpage.
Thank you.
Thank you with having acknowledged and without wasting any time, I think I should now come to the topic which has been said to me. And the topic which sends to me happens to be a subject which is so very relevant today, and the subject matter pertains to research methodologies. When I talk of research and the methodologies, it is very apt to understand that a profile of an individual, when especially more so in an academic domain, lies on two aspects. One is teaching, which is naturally outcome of your profile as a faculty. And the number two happens to be the research methodology, which is a research orientation which is inbuilt into a faculty. Now, unless and until a research is parallelly driven along with academics, generally speaking, an academic institution doesn't come out shining. More so in today's realm, when you have a concept of various accreditation and rankings of an institute, which is spread across the multiple spectrum. So if you understand what is research, it is broadly defined kind of as a systematic gathering of data, information, analysis of it towards the advancement of knowledge. It can be in any subject. It need not be defined to a very specific subject. That subject is your specific domain. And what does it answer? It attempts to find answer through application of some very systematic methods. In case if you want to really have a definition, it's a studious inquiry or an examination. This is how, however, some people consider research as a movement from the known to the unknown, because you're going into a realm of something which is not being explored till now, and you're trying to find reasonable, rational to an answer to a query which has been plaguing in your mind for a very long time. And hence, research is thus an original contribution to the existing stock of knowledge making for its advancement. It is the pursuit of truth with the help of study, observation, comparison, and experiment. In short, in case if we want to just give a very brief understanding, it is a search for a knowledge through objective and systematic method of finding a solution to a problem.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Your screen is not shared and the video is also not on, sir.
Ma'am, no, it's okay.
Yeah,
Ma'am,
it's fine.
pardon me for saying, ma'am, but I do not have any structured
Fine,
presentation.
fine.
I generally prefer in speaking
Yeah,
so that, people are listening. Otherwise, what happens is the presentation is something which is downloaded and people don't
exactly.
understand. So that's the reason I generally do that, ma'am.
Please, sir. Carry on, sir. Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Not at all, ma'am, not at all. And this systematic approach of research concerning generalization and the formulation of theory is called the research. And hence, when you speak about research, it combines of various aspects. And when you speak about the aspects, it is about enunciating a problem. Once the problem has been defined, you have to formulate a hypothesis. And on formulating the hypothesis, it is collecting of the facts or the data, analyzing the certain facts or the data, and reaching to certain conclusions, either in the form of solutions towards the concerned problem or in certain generalizations for some theoretical formulation. This is broadly what you call as when we people go for formulating the research. And once we say what is the objectives of research, objectives of the research happens to be to gain familiarity with the phenomenon or to achieve new insights into it. Studies with this object in view are termed as, maybe it's called as exploratory or formulative research subjects or research studies. To portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation, or a group. Studies with this object in view, generally speaking, falls in the category of descriptive research studies. The other one, which is called as a diagnostic research studies, is to determine the frequency with which something occurs, or the timing, or the associated something with the frequency of occurrence of an activity is called as diagnostic research studies. And the last one, which is generally speaking, when you speak about on these lines, happens to be the hypothesis testing research studies. And this is to test a hypothesis of a relationship between the variables. This is what is referred to as hypothesis testing research studies. And continuation from above, once we go into a detail, and once you have finalized the subject, you made up your mind to go for research, research falls into various categories. Some major areas of classifying research happens to be descriptive versus analytical, qualitative versus quantitative, conceptual versus empirical, and applied versus fundamental. When you say what's a descriptive research, it concentrates on finding the facts. Analytical is concerned with determining the validity of the hypothesis. And similarly, applied is to find answers to practical problems. Fundamental is basically to satisfy one's own intellectual curiosity or one's own individual thought process, which is coming. And hence, this is with the intention of using research, finding for any immediate practical application. This is what you call as a fundamental research. Conceptual research is investigation of thoughts and ideas and then developing some new ones or interpreting the old ones based on certain logical steps or certain logical reasoning. Whereas in contrast, if you see what's an empirical research, it's based on firm verified data collected by either observation of facts under natural conditions or obtained through certain practical sets of experiments or certain practical sets of activities which have been carried out for the purposes of achieving at that particular remark. In some other types of research also do exist when one does go into the deeper sets of research. And all other types of research are variations of one or more of the above stated only. Either you do in combination or you do a little bit variation from one which is based on above. And in case if one is doing it, the research leads to a entering into a domain which is an unknown, and hence you carry out facts to verify them and then come to a logical conclusion. The above description, which I just mentioned as of now, for the purposes of understanding of a particular research, leads to a very well-defined question. Then what should be the research approaches? And then it brings to the light that there are two basic approaches, quantitative and qualitative. The quantitative involves the generation of the data in quantitative form, which can be subjected to rigorous quantitative analysis in a formal and rigid fashion. This approach subsequently can be further classified, and it gets classified into 2 or 3 other aspects. Some of them happens to be experimental or stimulation kind of a research. And the purposes of this research happens to be to form a database. All of them form a database, and then to which you infer the characteristics, or with the sample testing or the population testing which you've done, you carry out a characterization or relationships of the population. This usually means survey research, where a sample of population is studied and then it is inferred that the population has the same characteristics. Experimental research, on the other hand, is characterized by much greater control over the research environment. And in this case, some variables are manipulated to come to a reasonable answer. And when you say qualitative research or qualitative approach to research, it is qualitative approach to research is with subjective assessment of the opinion, of the attitude, and then in this case, it is a function of the researcher's insight and impressions. Such an approach largely to research generates results either in non-quantitative form or in the form which are not subjected to rigorous quantitative analysis. Generally speaking, when you go for this kind of thing, the technique which happens is it focuses on group interviews, projective techniques, and depth interviews as well. This is generally largely the method which you do. There has been an inherent question, what is the understanding when we speak about methodology? Because today's topic happens to be the research methodology, but it's very important to understand that what is the rationale and what is the understanding or a difference between the research methods and the research methodologies. And it will be very pertinent for me at this point to make you understand that there is a very subtle difference between methods and methodology. Methods, that is the research, it is understood as all those methods and all those activities or techniques that are used for conducting the specific research. And hence researchers' methods or techniques or activities refer to the methods that a researcher, for that matter, uses in performing these operations. The methods which are used by the researcher during conduct of these or during the course of studying to find a solution to these problems are termed as research methods. And it is to arrive at a solution for a given problem. The available data and the unknown aspects of the problem have to be related to each other to make a solution possible. And hence, when you say that the research methods are further, for larger understanding, can follow into certain groups. If at all research methods has to be understood, it comes into certain groups. The first one, just to start with the understanding, those methods which are concerned with the collection of data. Second, those over which statistical techniques are used to establish certain set of relationships between the data and the unknown. The third are those methods which are used to evaluate, practically used to evaluate the accuracy of the results obtained. And hence research methods, the one which I said about the balance two, the first one in which only the data was getting collected, are taken as the analytical tools of the research. Now, in case if suppose what's a research methodology? Research methodology is a way to systematically solve a particular research problem. And it may be understood. It is very clearly, in case if you understand the subject, and once a researcher is going to take this particular subject to take it forward, it is a science of studying how research is done scientifically. It's necessary for each and every researcher to know, and not only know and understand also, that the research methods or techniques, but also the methodology. So both the aspects needs to be very well understood for each and every individuals. And hence, it is also very rational for everyone at this point of time to understand that the assumptions underlying various techniques also should be understood, and one needs to also understand the criteria over by which they can decide the certain techniques and procedures are available to solving a particular certain problem. All this means that is necessary for the researcher to design this methodology for his problem as the same may differ from problem to problem. For example, in case if you take an example, and an architect who designs a building has to consciously evaluate the basis of his decision. He has to continuously keep select as to why and on what basis he selects a particular size, the number, the depth, the location of his door, windows. He has to see the vents, the ventilation. And this is continuously evolving in his mind. On the similar side, in research, a scientist has to continuously keep exposing the research decisions to evaluations before even they are implemented. And one has to very clearly specify, and precisely that to very clearly, that what decision needs to be selected and why they have been selected, so that they can be evaluated by others also. And hence we can say that the research methodology has many dimensions and research methods, and they constitute to be part of a research methodology. And the scope between the research methodology and the research methods is much, much wider. So the research methodology has a very wider scope as compared to research. Thus, when we speak about research methodology, we are not only talking of the research methods, but we are also considering the logic behind the method that we have been using in context to our study. And then you need to be explaining as to why this particular research method or a technique is being used, and why not the others one are being used to evaluate or to come at a decision by the researcher himself, or in case he is has a peer group which is there with him, then this can also be questioned and answered by the group along with him to come to a better reasonable solution. And why the research study has been undertaken, how the research problem has been defined, in what way, and why the hypothesis has been formulated, which particular data has been collected, and for collecting what method has been used. After collecting the particular data, what techniques of analyzing the data has been carried out. There are a lot of other questions on a similar nature, which are generally speaking answered, or we'll come to a solution to these while we talk about research methodology in a research. These are the various, generally speaking, questions which comes to the mind of an individual when we come to a topic discussing the research. And once we dwell deeper into the research methodology and techniques, it is very apt at this point of time to first give a broad overview of research. A research process, it actually is very sequential, with certain overlapping, with certain inbuilt feedbacks which are given to a loop. And one is largely aware of this once we come into this thing. So first thing is, when you do these kind of things, it is to identify a research problem. Once a research problem has been identified, naturally the next state which comes is you have to do the review of the literature. When we say review of the literature, it is reviewing the concepts and theories, review previous research findings, if any, and then you come and formulate your thought process for review of the literature. Once this particular activity has happened, then you move to a step which is called as you're formulating or making up your hypothesis. Once you've made a hypothesis, then you come to design research. This is the stage where you actually speaking also come and at least decide about the sample design. And then you collect the data, you carry out the execution aspects, you do the methods of collecting the data as decided by you for the purposes of reaching a result. And then you analyze the data to test the hypothesis. These are something which can also serve as a function of the providing the criteria for evaluation. That is, from designing research, you also can go to the analyzing and data. And once you have tested the hypothesis based on your collected data and the evaluation, you interpret it and report. These are the multiple steps which comes in a case of a research methodology. And for any research scholars who are attending this particular talk, I think each one of you are already clear that the steps which have to be taken. Only thing is that this kind of a talk, when it's given, and it's so pertinent that when you have a talk of this nature, it broadens the horizon, or at least gives a person an understanding, a feeling that research is a very active part of each and every individual, especially more so in case if you come in academics or you take a line on part of the research. And at times, the step which I just mentioned, the first step determines the nature of the last steps to be undertaken. And if subsequent procedures which have carried out in a sequential manner have not been taken into account, then there are certain difficulties which come into play. And hence one should always remember while going forward that the steps are not mutually exclusive, nor are they distinct, or nor are they separate. It is what we call is every step is dependent on each other, and hence it cannot be carried out in isolation. That is what is the understanding once we say that they are mutually inclusive. So these steps which we say are all mutually inclusive, and they do not necessarily follow each other in a step or a sequence which has been told. It is not necessary. The researcher, anybody, has to constantly anticipating, he has to constantly keep anticipating at each step and the requirements, and hence the maybe in case if you people feel that there has to be some broad method, the some broad method happens to be like I just mentioned. You formulate a research problem, come for a literature survey, carry out an extensive literature survey, formulate a hypothesis, develop a hypothesis, go for the designing of the research, that is you prepare your research design, then sample design, determining the sample design, collect the data, then execution of the project, analysis of the data, and then you carry out a preparation of the report, and then you present. Yes, and then in between you also carry out a hypothesis testing, and then you formally write up and reach to a conclusion. And how are these done? When you speak about formulating the research problem, there are two types of research problem. Those which relate to the states of nature, and those relate to the relationship between the variables. At the outset, the researcher must single out the problem which he wants to study. That is, he must decide, one needs to decide the general area of interest or aspect of a subject matter that one would like to inquire. Initially, in case if you're starting, the problem may be stated in a broad general way, and then the ambiguities, if any, relating to the problem may be resolved. The best way to understand the problem is to discuss it with one's own colleagues, or with your faculty members, or with those having some expertise in the matter. And in an academic institution where all of us are today, the researcher can seek the help from the guide. That's the purpose, that you have a guide. In certain cases, you have a co-guide, which is usually an experienced individual and has several research problems in mind. And it is but obvious often that the guide puts forth the problem in general terms, and then it is for the researcher to narrow it down and phrase the problem in the manner in which he sees it as an operationalized, or in which he can take it as an operational term. However, the research also happens in outside world other than the academic institutions also. And outside, the problem is usually speaking given by the administrative agencies or earmarked by the administrative agencies with whom the researcher can discuss as to how the original problem has come about, and then he can actually speaking come about finding certain solutions, and based on the probable solutions one needs to work about in the domain of working on the finding a solution to the problem. The researcher, however, at the same time examines all available literature to get himself or herself acquainted to the shortlisted or the selected problem. One can review the two types of literature: the conceptual literature concerning the concepts and the theories, and the empirical literature, which I keep saying are the studies which are made earlier, which are of similar nature to the one that you are also getting proposed. The outcome, what you do is the outcome of this review will be the knowledge as to what data and other materials are available for operational purposes, which will enable a particular individual to specify his own research problem in a meaningful purpose. When this work has been done, the researcher then phrases his particular problem into analytical or operational terms. That is, to put the problem as far as specific as possible. And the task of formulating for the or identifying or defining a research problem is supposed to be the greatest step in the complete process of research. And the problem to be investigated must have very clear sentencing, that it should be absolutely unambiguous, that will enable the research to carry out in a very correct manner, and it will help discriminating relevant data from irrelevant ones. And the care at this point of time must be taken to verify the objectivity and validity of the background facts concerning the particular problem. In fact, formulation of the problem often follows a very sequential pattern, where a number of formulations are set up, each formulation more specific than the preceding one, each one phrased in a more analytical terms, and each one realistic in terms of available data and resource. And once you have defined the problem, and once the problem becomes concrete, we move to the extensive literature survey. And once you have formulated, a brief summary of it should be written down. It is compulsory for a research, any individual, to writing a thesis for the PhD degree, to write a synopsis of the topic and submit it to the necessary committee. Each and every institute has its own committee to go at this point of time and post its approval. Only then the individual moves forward. And at this juncture, the individual should be in a position to take an extensive literature survey, which has been connected with a particular defined problem. And hence, abstracting and indexing of journals and published or unpublished bibliographies are the first place, generally speaking, to go to. Academic journals, conference proceedings, government reports, etc. must also be scrutinized, must also be tapped, depending on the nature of your problem. And once you have carried out an extensive literature survey, then you go for developing or working hypothesis. And after extensive literature survey, one should come in terms of developing the hypothesis. Working hypothesis, what we call is a assumption. It is made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. As such, the manner in which research hypotheses are developed is particularly important, since they provide the focal point for research. They also affect the manner in which the test must be conducted in the analysis of data, and indirectly the quality of data which is required for the analysis. In most types of research, the development of working hypothesis plays a very important part. And this hypothesis which is being made should be very specific, limited to the research which is being undertaken, because please appreciate and understand that this is what needs to be tested. And the role of the hypothesis is to guide the researcher by delimiting the area of research and to keep sure that the researcher is on the right track. It also aligns him or sharpens one's thinking and focuses the attention on more important facets of the problem. And at the same time, it also indicates the type of data that is required and the type of methods of data analysis that needs to be carried out to reach to a particular conclusion. And how does one do about? One can do about by doing discussion with colleagues, with the experts, examination of data of the records concerning the problem for possible trends, peculiarities, review of similar studies, which I call it empirical studies, in the area of the same nature studies or similar problems, exploratory personal investigation, which involves original field interviews on a limited scale with interested party and individuals with a view to secure a greater insight into the practical aspects of the problem. And the working hypothesis arise as a result of priori thinking about the particular subject, examination of the available data and material, including related studies, and the council of experts and interested parties. And working hypothesis, what we now coming at, are more useful when stated in precise and clear defined terms, which I just mentioned earlier, for a purpose of making sure that the individual continuously keep remaining aligned, and it also helps him to segregate the particular data which is coming from the ones which are more meaningful to your particular research from the ones which can be set aside. And once you have made out a working hypothesis, then in that case, the very clear cut the researcher needs to be defining a research design. This implies that one has to state the conceptual structure within which research would be conducted. The preparation of such a design facilitates research to be as efficient as possible, yielding maximal information. In other words, just for a clarity purpose, the function of research design is to provide collection of relevant evidence with minimal effort, putting in time and effort of money and effort. In the sense means it enables us to come to a very reasonable conclusion. But how can one achieve all this? It gets segregated or classified in 4 different categories. Exploratory, that description, diagnosis, and the 4th one happens to be experimentation. And once we speak about design, research design, it's as flexible, and hence a flexible research design provides opportunity for considering many different aspects of a problem as one feels appropriate. And if the purpose of the research study is that of exploration, the sequence which I said 4 of them, then the purpose happens to be an accurate description of the situation or an association between the variables. There are several research designs which are like experimental, non-experimental hypothesis testing. Experimental designs can be either informal, with control, before and after, or formal designs, block designs, randomized, Latin square designs, and other out of which options which are available to the researcher, he must select any one for his particular project. And how does one leads to the preparation of the research design? It is number one needs to be very clearly in defining, or it involves means of obtaining the information, the availability of skill of a particular individual, and in case if he is alone or if he is accompanied by his staff, the guidance which he is receiving, the explanation of the way in which certain selected means of obtaining information will be organized, the time available for the research, and last, the finance available for the purpose. So having gone through these aspects of research designing, then one naturally comes to the next step, which happens to be determining the sample design. Anything which comes under consideration in any field of inquiry or in any field of thought process constitutes a population. And hence a complete enumeration of all the items in the population is called as a, or is known as a census inquiry. Census inquiry is when all the items are covered. No element of chance is left, and hence highest accuracy is obtained. But in practice, this may not be true. Even the slightest element of bias in such an inquiry will get larger and larger as the number of observation increases. Furthermore, there is no way of checking the element of bias or its extent through which the survey or the sample checks is being carried out, except you have checks in between of the sample, or the random sampling checks are carried out. Besides, this type of inquiry involves a great deal of time, money, and energy. Not only this, the census inquiry is not possible in practice under many circumstances. And the census inquiry, for instance, blood testing. In case if you go for blood testing for the purposes of enhancing your research, is only done on a sample basis. Hence, quite often we select only a few limited samples for the purposes of our study, which we are now calling it a population. And the items so select constitute what is technically called sample. The researcher needs to decide at this point of time the way of selecting a sample, or what is popularly known as sample design. Sample design is a definite plan determined before any data are actually collected for obtaining a sample from a given population. With probability samples, each element has a known probability of being included in the sample, but the non-probability samples do not allow the researcher to determine the probability. Probability samples are those which are based on simple random sampling, systematic sampling, then stratified sampling. And these samples are those which are, whereas the non-probability samples are those which are based on convenience sampling, judgment sampling, and quota sampling techniques. Deliberate sampling is also known as a non-probability sampling. It falls in the category of non-probability sampling. This type of sampling method involves a deliberate selection of a particular units of that population or the universe for constituting a sample which represents the population. When the population elements are selected for the inclusion in the sample based on the ease of access, it is called as a convenience sampling. If a researcher wishes to secure data from, say, any specific activity, then he may select a fixed number of that particular points, and then he may carry out that particular activity. Then in that case, that particular activity becomes very pointed, that he is doing it for that specific reason. For example, if he wishes to carry out a household income, then he needs to carry out a household income across the section, or in case if the research is of such a nature that he wishes to carry out for one specific income group, then in that case, he needs to carry out the expenditure pattern of that specific income group. Then he is very aligned to that particular sampling. And this is an example of convenience sampling. At times, such a procedure may give very biased results, particularly when the population is not homogeneous. On the other hand, in judgment sampling, the researcher's judgment used for selecting the items to which one considers as representative of the population. For example, a judgment sampling of a college students might be taken to secure reactions to a new method of classroom education or a classroom teaching. And hence judgment sampling is used very frequently in qualitative research, where the desire happens to be to develop hypothesis rather than to generalize to larger population. Systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is the most practical way of sampling to select every 15th name, or for that matter, every 10th. It's a sequence which one needs to know. This is called as a systematic sampling. And an element of randomness is usually introduced in this kind of a sampling by using random numbers to pick from where to start. The procedure is useful when the sampling frame is available in the form of a list. In such design, the selection process starts by picking some random point in the list, and then every nth, you carry a 10th or 15th, and hence every nth element is selected until and unless the desired number of samples are available with each other. Similarly, you have a stratified sampling, you have quota sampling, you have cluster and area sampling. And why I wish to inform about cluster and area sampling, primarily because cluster and area sampling involves grouping the complete population and then selecting the groups or the clusters rather than individual elements for the inclusion in the sample. And this kind of a sampling makes the procedure relatively easier and increases the efficiency in the fieldwork, especially in case of personal interviews, especially in case of certain data which needs to be taken. Area sampling is quite close to cluster sampling and is often talked about when the total geographical area of interest happens to be a large. Under the area sampling, you divide the total area into a number of smaller non-overlapping areas, generally called as geographical clusters. Then a number of these are randomly or selectively selected. All the units in these small areas are included in the sample, and the area sample is especially helpful where we do not have the list of population. And it also makes the field interviewing more efficient, since the interviewer can do many or a large number of interviews in a specific location. After having the data sampling carried out over various methods, where there is one another called a sequential sampling also, this is somewhat little complex kind of a sampling, where the ultimate size of the sample is not fixed. And it's not fixed in advance, but this is determined according to the mathematical decisions or mathematical model which is being arrived based on the information as survey progresses. And this is usually adopted under acceptance sampling plan in the context of statistical quality control. Once these have been done, then we need to do the collecting of the data. And in dealing with any real life problem, it is often found that the data at hand are inadequate, and hence it becomes very necessary to collect the data that is appropriate. There are many ways of collecting the data which differ considerably from one method to another method in context of the money, time, effort, and other resources which are at the disposal of a particular researcher. Primary data can be collected either through experiment or through survey. In case the researcher conducts an experiment, he observes that some qualitative or quantitative measurements on the data, with the help of which he examines the fact or the truth which is contained in his hypothesis. But in case of a survey, data can be collected by any of the following methods. It can be by observation. It can be through personal interview. It can be through telephone interviews. It can be by means of mailing questionnaires. It can be through schedules. And today's time, this has further been extended by means of the social media. One can also have a questionnaire prepared like the one which I just mentioned, one of the methods. and put it on social media, you are getting a cross section of the people answering to that particular response of yours. And once you get a data, then the data which gets collected on a very large base on these methods is then leads to the execution of project. And the researcher, it is his paramount duty, obviously under the guidance of his supervisor, to select any one of the methods for the purpose of collecting the data, taking into consideration the nature of investigation, the objective and the scope of the inquiry. Obviously, the finance, the time available and the resources available come largely as the deciding factor. Though one should pay attention to all these factors, but much depends upon the ability and the experience of the researcher also. And then when you come to the execution of the project, the execution of the project is an equally important step. Always keep remembering that no one step is in isolation to one another and they are sequentially not there. They are actually speaking overlapping for the purposes of coming to a conclusion. The project is a very important step that is the execution in a research process. And if the execution of the project proceeds on correct lines, the data to be collected would be more or less adequate and be sufficient to come to a particular conclusion. One should see continuously that the project is executed in a very, very systematic manner and in a reasonable time. In case the survey is to be conducted by means of questionnaire, data can be readily machine processed. In such a situation, questions as the probable answers or the possible answers may be coded. If the data is to be collected through interviews, arrangement should be made to have a proper selection and training of the interviewers. The training may be given by means of an instruction manual, which explains clearly the job of the interviewers at each step. Occasional field checks should be made to ensure that the interviewers are doing their assigned job sincerely and efficiently. And one needs to be continuously monitor or a careful watch should be kept on all unanticipated factors in order to keep the survey as realistic as possible. If some of the respondents do not cooperate, it does happen in case of any survey that is being taken, some suitable method should be designed to tackle that particular problem. One method of dealing with the non-response problem is to make a list of non-respondents and take a small subsample of them. And then with the help of experts, vigorous efforts can be made for securing the response. This is generally speaking, just few methods as to how one does carry out a sample testing. Collection of data, which is then a subsequent process of leading to the testing. Then comes is a equally important step. Once you have collected the complete data, then one needs to come to the very apt step, which is called as analyzing the data. You have collected a large questionnaire is available with you how to analyze. This analyze requires number of closely related operations such as establishment of categories, the application of these categories to raw data through coding, tabulation, and then drawing certain inferences. The unwieldy data should necessarily be condensed into a few manageable groups and certain tables for subsequent analysis. And hence the researcher should classify the raw data into some purposeful and useful categories. Coding operation is usually done at this stage through which the categories of data are transformed into symbols that may be tabulated and counted. Editing is the procedure that improves the quality of data for the purposes of coding. With the coding, the stage is now ready for tabulation. Tabulation is a part of the technical procedure wherein the classified data are put in the form of tables. The mechanical device can be used at this point of time for this juncture. And a great deal of data, especially in large inquiries, is tabulated by computers. Computers not only save time and effort, but also make it helpful to study the large number of variables affecting a problem simultaneously. Analysis work, then after the tabulation, is generally based on computation of various percentages, coefficient, etc. by applying various well-defined statistical formulae. And in the process of analysis, relationship or differences supporting or conflicting with original or the new hypothesis should be subjected to test of significance to determine with what validity data can be said to indicate any conclusion. For instance, if there are two samples, each sample being drawn needs from a different part, given two different mean values, then our problem may be whether the two mean values are significantly different or the difference is just a matter of chance. And hence, through the use of statistical tests, we establish whether such a difference is a real one or it's because of some certain random fluctuations. If the difference happens to be real, then the inference will be that the two samples research come from different universes, and if the difference is due to chance, then the conclusion would be that the two samples belong to the same universe. So that is the understanding. In case if it comes from, if the difference is real, then it comes from two samples, then the research is coming from different universes. And in case if the difference is due to chance, the conclusion is that the samples which is belonging to the same universe. Similarly, the technique of analysis of variance also helps us in analyzing whether there are more varieties, for example, of seeds which are grown on certain fields yields significantly different results or not. In a way, the researcher can analyze the given particular data, collected data with the help of various statistical measures. Having done this particular analyzing of the data, then comes the question of hypothesis testing. After analyzing the data, then the researcher is in a very perfect position to test the hypothesis, if any, which he has formulated earlier. Do the facts which have come now support the hypothesis, or they happen to be at variance from what it was told, or it's contrary to what it was thought earlier? This is the usual question, generally speaking, which is answered while testing the hypothesis. And the hypothesis may be tested through the use of any of the tests, something like a chi-square test, or t-test, or f-test, depending upon the nature and object of research inquiry. Hypothesis testing results in either accepting the hypothesis or in rejecting it. And in case if the researcher does not have a hypothesis to start with, generalization established on the basis of the data may be stated as hypothesis to be tested by subsequent researchers in the times to come. And this comes to, and if hypothesis is tested and upheld several times, it may be possible for the researcher to arrive at a generalization, that is, to build a theory. As a matter of fact, if the researcher had no hypothesis to start with, he might seek to explain his findings on the basis of some theory. This is known as interpretation. And the process of interpretation now may quite often trigger off new question, which in turn can be the start point for many more researchers to come in the times to come. And the real value of research lies in the ability of researcher to arrive at certain generalizations for the purposes of testing the hypothesis. Once it has been done, then in that case, you're supposed to be making a preparation of the report or the thesis. The researcher then prepares a report. Writing of a report has to be done with utmost care. You're supposed to be giving out certain preliminary findings, pages, then the main text, and then the end matter supporting. In the preliminary pages, report should generally carry your format, which is in a research, which is title and date, followed by acknowledgement. And then in the report, it's generally speaking the introduction, summary of findings, main report, conclusion. And once you have done it, you're supposed to be also having certain charts and illustrations in the main report, which should be used only if they present the information more clearly and supporting your fact. The report is supposed to be written in a very concise and objective style, in a simple language, avoiding any vague expressions. At the end, as a matter of practice, you're supposed to be appendicizing. It should be listing all technical data, the bibliography, the list of books, journal reports. Index should also be given, especially in a published research report. And what, if I may say, what is the criteria of a good research? Criteria of a good research may be in case of whatever may be the types of research and studies. One thing that is extremely important is that they all meet a common ground of scientific method employed by them. One expects scientific research to satisfy certain laid down criteria, such as the purpose of the research should be clearly defined and common concepts bemused. The procedural design of the research should be very carefully planned to yield results that are objective as far as possible. The research procedure should be described in sufficient detail to permit another researcher to repeat the research for further enhancement, keeping the continuity of what has already been achieved as part of this particular activity. So for this process, the research procedure becomes very, very important. The researcher should report with complete honesty, frankness, any flaws in the procedural design and the impact and the effect which has had on its finding. The analysis of the data should be sufficiently adequate to reveal its significance, and the methods of analysis should be apt and appropriate. The validity and reliability of the data should be checked carefully. Conclusions should be confined to those justified by the data of the research and limited to those for which the data provide an adequate basis. And hence we say a good researcher is systematic, a good research is logical, a good research is empirical, and the good research is something which can be followed up and which can be taken further from the problems which have been said in a manner. It says that it is replicable. And this is where you define the complete research. And having done the complete processes for the purposes of achieving an activity, one needs to understand the research and its submission of your stated findings is not the end of the research. It is the beginning of the research by some other individual into your own stated topics, or one can himself or herself take up for the purposes of enhancing the outcome which has been achieved as part of this particular activity. It does not requires any special mention by any one individual to imply on the fact that research happens to be a very, very important aspect as far as an activity of any individual is concerned. Like stated in the beginning, the principal also did mention research paves the way for an individual to open up his horizon. It paves the way for an individual to actually speaking question. It paves the way for an individual to find or go into the realms of unknown and then coming with some probable answer or a solution to it. And having been now in academics for the last few years, I can only say with a lot of confidence and with a lot of happiness that the research which is happening around is largely in a manner which is so very well defined by the sequence or the steps which each one of us do study. Research methodology, I think, is a proper subject which is to be taken as part of a coursework by each and everybody. So one does very honestly work forward, and one needs to understand it is only sincerity and honesty in this kind of a work which can take one forward for coming with an apt result as far as a solution to a research is concerned. A very recent incident, all of us were there in around 3, 4 years, 5 years back when the corona had struck. One needs to really appreciate our pharmacists, one needs to really appreciate our scientists. If not for their research and if not for their groundbreaking solutions to the problem which was plaguing not only the country but the world would have suffered much more. But it is only because of continuous research and continuous finding solutions to the new problems, because what happened was a kind of a virus, very self-mutating virus. Finding a solution to an issue which is continually becoming a problem, and the problem is continuously redefining itself. That is exactly what is the hallmark and the benefit of our research. And I am left with no doubt that we are living in a generation wherein the problems will keep coming. But having said that the problems keep coming, we have a very well-defined and a very good brains in the system which can always find solutions to those problems. Solutions to those problems can only be found when one is continuously aligned to research, when one does do the study, when one does spend reasonable time in thought process as to what topic should be taken. The whole question once again comes is preferably a topic which should be taken in a research for the purposes of moving forward, and then arriving at a solution should be the one which is plaguing the society or the humanity in large. Thank you. Thanks each and everyone. It was a pleasure talking on research methodology and the various aspects of it. Thanks for connecting with RMK. Thanks for connecting with each one of you. And great for me to have an opportunity being on your platform. It's a pleasure always.
Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of RFK Engineering College, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Colonel B. Venkat, sir, for his insightful and enriching session. We are deeply appreciative of the time and effort you have dedicated to sharing your knowledge with us today. Thank you once again for being here and making this session a memorable one. With that, we bring today's session to a close. On behalf of RMK Engineering College, we sincerely thank you all for being a part of Generic Talk Series 23. We eagerly look forward to your participation in our upcoming events. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
Very,
sir.
very informative talk with an excellent delivery, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, ma'am. When with your permission, can I break off, ma'am?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Grateful, ma'am, and always an honor to be coming on your platform.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Regards, ma'am.
Very, sir.